Touches of sweet harmony. Good morning. To those of you who are here in very humid weather today, and those who will be watching us through the internet connection of our live stream, my name is Sheila McKinnon, and I welcome you to this service. And we are calling this the Reign of Christ. Today is a day where we gather, we gather on this land of the Coast Salish people. We recognize that they have been gathering on this, their land, for millennia. And we pray for the day of right relationship to be restored. This is also the day in which we remember the trans community, and this flag was a gift to us from a member of that community. You'll see the small note at the top of our bulletin. The Transgender Day of Remembrance, November 20th, was set aside to recognize those who have been killed due to ignorance and hatred, targeted because they were trans or gender non-conforming. The first event took place in 1999 in San Francisco to honor Rita Hester, who had been brutally murdered in the previous year. Rita was stabbed in Massachusetts. We can't bring Rita back, but maybe we can arrest the next murder, or at least begin to lessen some of the ignorance and violence that contributed to the murder by making an effort to respectfully represent transgendered people. May it be so. Okay.
Good morning. I'm representing the knitting group, and this is a Sunday for reports. And I want to report, you can see a picture on the screen. On Friday, Joan Mickelson and I took 4 boxes of sweaters up to the Cridge Center. It amounted to probably over 40 sweaters. We stopped counting when we got to 40. And we were welcomed by 3 classes of children in the daycare that were going out between showers, suitably attired in rain gear and boots and the whole business, with the warmest welcome. They'd never seen us before. We'd never seen them before, but they were so warm in their welcome. Hi, 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 and waving and goodbye as they went out the door. And then we met the coordinator of the daycare programs, and she took us into one of the classes. 4 of the dearest little souls you could ever care to meet in your life. And one little boy, as soon as the box was opened, decided that he really thought it would be a good idea if he tried on every sweater in the box. Not to mention that, to start off with, he found a purple toque that he really liked that happened to be attached to a coordinating sweater. And he was trying to put the toque on with the sweater attached. That didn't work very well. It kept falling off. And so eventually he let one of the teachers help him take the toque off the sweater, and he wore that all the time we were there. But he didn't care what color the sweater was, how fancy it was, or anything else. And he had 3 or 4 of them on before we left. And as we left, he was blowing us kisses. And that just about finished us, I can tell you. I could cheerfully have taken him home, but I don't think his mom and dad would have been too happy. But all of that happened because of the generosity of this congregation, who provided us with the funding for the yarn and the buttons, and to our knitting group, and to friends of our knitting group who made all these sweaters. And we've had such a wonderful response to our Adopt a Sweater program that I may get killed by the knitting group, but I've already said we will do the same thing next year. So if you don't see me around, you'll know when the December knitting meeting comes that I've either been drummed out of the knitting group or I've been drummed out of the church. But seriously, thank you for your very kind support in the comments, the funding, the support that we've had to allow us to do this program. It was just the greatest time we've spent in a long time.
Good morning. Next Sunday at 2 o'clock after the service, Kelly Charlton and Alec Crossu and I will be joining here on the pulpit to present a 1-hour program that is combining spoken word and music for flute and piano. We'll start at 2, we'll be done by 3. It's not in the bulletin, nor is it on the slides, but we have these handy little flyers out and about. So if anybody didn't get one and would like one, we'll run those around while the announcements are going on. Admission is by donation, and all the donations, and I do mean all the donations, go to support the choral scholars here at First Metropolitan. So I hope to see you out. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Emily McDonald, and I'm making an announcement for the Weird Church team, and just want to thank all the volunteers who are coming out to help us with our free neighborhood pasta night, and that's this Thursday, November 21st, at 4 o'clock in the Fellowship Hall. And what was I going to say about that? I think that's it about that. The other thing is I signed myself up today for the Kairos blanket exercise, and I can no longer go. So I have a ticket. If somebody would like to take my place, I'd love to give it to you. Okay, thanks so much.
A vision for our faith community, a vision of joyful worship. A vision of faithfulness to God's word, the challenge of the prophets heard, the Psalms a strength, the teachings of Jesus the way to follow. A vision with the love of the sacred spirit at the center. was expecting one more announcement from Kevin. Kirk from Kamloops. Kevin from Kelowna. Something like that. Come on up. Introduce yourself properly, sorry.
So my name's Kirk Stott from Kelowna, BC, and it's my mother's 90th birthday weekend. So we're going to celebrate. There she is right there, yeah. So we're welcoming you all to come and join us afterwards for a piece of birthday cake, and we'll all love to meet you. So if you'd like to meet us after the service, that would be fantastic.
Thanks for doing that. That's great. We love to celebrate. Congratulations on 90 years. When we have cake, we will sing. Let's gather together in prayer. Holy One, we have come this morning to discover your love in the small wonders of the moment. You want to breathe in your goodness as experienced in the gift and beauty of your love. We see a time of rest, a Sabbath filled with reassurance and hope. We want to welcome the scripture and story, ancient truths, and new ways of understanding. We want to share together in the treasure of the here and now, to feast on the fruit of joy that you give to nourish our souls. Sacred Spirit, become all we have, bodies, souls, minds. We have come for a glimpse of your justice, a world where love, compassion, and inclusivity are abundant. Amen. Larry Scott is taking the children's story this morning.
Now, Larry Scott often needs help in more ways than one, but especially help from the children this morning if they would like to come forward. There we go. Usually we're painting sets together and things like that, but this morning we're in story time. There. Oh, I think we've got everybody, even a camera and some people figures and a yo-yo. Oh, let's forget about the story and play with the toys. However, I have brought a special toy, sort of. What do you think is in the bag? And I know the first thing you would think of is my submarine sandwich. But no, it's not that. It's something else. What could be in a long bag like this? Would anyone like to lift it to see, is it heavy? Sort of heavy. Depends how big you are, I think. It could be a flute. Mary, do you think it's a flute?
No.
No, she's shaking her head. No respectable flute player would carry it around in something like this. And she would know. What else could be in the black bag? Jumper cables. Reverend McKinnon is more practical than I thought. Well, how could we solve this mystery?
By opening it up.
By opening it?
Yeah.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Well, let me see. Can you pull the zipper around maybe? And then William, can you pull it a little bit more? Oh, yeah. Nothing jumped out yet. He pulled it a little bit more.
Oh, I can see it. I can see it.
Oh, you can see it. What do you think?
Bagpipe.
You've already figured out what's in it. Now you have. Well,
Oh, it's a mat.
it's a mat. Yes, it does look like a mat when you hold it up like this.
But something inside.
But if we turn it around, it's a plumbing kit with a whole bunch of little pipes.
What?
No? It's not plumbing. Okay. What do you think it is?
I don't know. Plumbing kit.
Bagpipes.
Yeah.
Well, they're awfully small to be bagpipes. Bagpipes are long and big usually. Well, let's see if we can make it long and bigger. Oh my goodness,
I saw a zipper.
there's knots and everything. Oh, here's a tassel. There we go. That's a very important part of bagpipes, the tassel. And this part that looks kind of broken. Oh dear. However, if we put that part on this part and we hold it up like this, it's a bagpipe. And there is a zipper in the back as well. The zipper is for the cover, because inside the green, there is something like this. And this holds air. So, what can we do with bagpipes? Before anyone says start a fire, it's usually the clarinet players who say that. There's nobody musical back there who would suggest such a thing, and I'm not going to look. Well, one way of figuring out this thing, it must be good for something, is to take it apart a little bit. There we go. Or we take this part out. There we go. And inside, you know what this part is? A reed. And it's got a tongue on it. Have you got a tongue? There we go. Yes. Well, this has a tongue too. And what kind of sound do you think this would make? This is the longest pipe. High pitch sound like that, or low pitch sound like this? Low. High pitch. It's a United Church. We're covering all the possibilities. Okay, here's the longest one. Kind of like a foghorn, but not as loud as a full set of bagpipes. Well, we'll check them out. Now, let me see. This is kind of interesting. The one I showed you was this long one, and then there's this one in the middle that's not as long as that one, but it's longer than the short one, and then there's the short one, and then there's this one. So we'll check them out. What do you think the one in the middle sounds like? A little bit higher. That's a good guess. Barely working. That one's got a broken reed. This is the difficult part of reed instruments. The reeds don't always work. And some people are thankful for that. And we'll take the shortest one. These pipes that I'm pulling out now, they're all called drones. And what kind of drone do you know about? A drone. There is that kind that flies. But there is this kind as well. So this one's the shortest one of the drones. So slightly higher pitch than the big long one.
How do you play them?
This is a good question. How do you play them? Well, the biggest reed made the lowest sound and the bigger sound, and that was a smaller reed and it made a smaller sound. So let's go to the smallest reed of all. This is really small compared to the others. So would this be a big sound or a little sound? Tiny sound, because it's a small reed.
Yeah.
Small reed.
Okay, try it.
Some people in the back row are suspicious. I don't know why. Well, we should blow on it to make a sound, right? Okay. You can tell me if it's louder or softer. Louder. So even though it's smaller, it makes more sound. You can't always tell by looking at something what it's like inside.
Will we try to play it?
It has holes. Yeah, this is called the chanter. It's from the French verb to sing. So this is the singing part of the bagpipes. And there are a whole bunch of singers back there who are saying that's not singing. Well, yes, we're going to. So I'm still learning how to play. Do you know how long ago I started learning? 50 years ago.
How old were you?
How old was I? More than 50? Yeah, more than 50. No, that wasn't. I'm more than 50 now. No kidding. How old am I now? Oh, way older than 50.
How old are you?
Well, I'm kind of like, they say wines get better with age, but that's only true for wines. So anyway, we got all these pipes together, And although they look different on the outside, you don't really know what they're like until you look on the inside. And sometimes a big one makes a big sound, but sometimes it's the smallest one. Well, people are like that too. We don't really know about you until we know you inside, or you know somebody new at school or a neighbor. You can't tell by looking at them from the outside what they're really like unless you get to know them inside. And today is a day in the church when we remember peace, and we're also going to have a blanket exercise after church where we learn about First Nations. So that's a way of getting to know what people are like inside by going to a special thing and learning about them, or just talking and getting to know people at school. So we already have a recording of this. Do you want to hear what the whole thing sounds like? And because you're all nodding your head like this, and it's only the back row that's going like this, we're going to do that. Only if I can get up. Okay. Now, while I play something you'll recognize. Incidentally, ministers are very good at this because they have theological training in large reservoirs of air. And if you happen to have a Scottish surname like McKinnon, you'd be a natural for this. This takes a lot of wind. Has anyone got extra wind to share? Oh, just keep trying. Hear all that air going in? Oh, I know what I should do. Turn off the microphone.
A little bird told me about 4 seconds before we started.
Yes, little birds who might be learning to play bagpipes are useful that way. So he's got the music and you've got the melody in your head. And we all know this. We'll go out to Sunday school.
Our scripture reading this morning is from Luke chapter 1, verses 11 to 20. One day, Zechariah was doing his work as a priest in the temple. An angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar where the incense was burning. When Zechariah saw him, he was alarmed and felt afraid. But the angel said to him, "Don't be afraid, Zechariah. God has heard your prayer, and your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son. You are to name him John. How glad and happy you will be, and how happy many others will be when he is born. He will be a great man in the Lord's sight. He must not drink any wine or strong drink. From his very birth, he will be filled with the Holy Spirit, and he will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God. He will go ahead of the Lord, strong and mighty like the prophet Elijah. He will bring fathers and children together again. He will turn disobedient people back to the way of thinking of the righteous. He will get the Lord's people ready for him." Zechariah said to the angel, "How shall I know if this is so? I'm an old man, and my wife is old also." "I am Gabriel," the angel said. "I stood in the presence of God, who sent me to speak to you and tell you this good news. But you have not believed my message, which will come true at the right time. Because you have not believed, you will be unable to speak. You will remain silent until the day my promise to you comes true." This is part of our story. Thanks be to God.
When the angel announced the gift of John, whom we know as John the Baptist, he was reminding Zechariah, Elizabeth, and all of us in subsequent ages of God's being with God's people over and over again in so many different ways. This is the day of the church year where we look back over the year before us as part of the way of God, the way of following God. And so this particular Sunday, the reign of Christ, it used to be called, is a day where we reflect on the year past, because next Sunday starts a whole new church year. And so we are going to reflect with Adina and Ross about what's going on here at First Met and what's happened in this past year. And so after the tremendous success of having Margaret preach last week and how many positive comments I've heard about that, I'm thrilled that they'll be preaching here today. I'm still looking for a preacher for next Sunday if anybody feels like they'd like to come. But it's a wonderful thing for us to stay in open communication. The most important thing we know from church life is that we constantly keep each other informed of what's going on at the board level.
Behold, we bring you good news. That's angels speak for good morning. My name is Adina Malcolm, and I'm here this morning as the chair of the First Metropolitan Board with my fellow board member, Ross Brecken. Here we go. To represent the board. Uh-oh. There's a picture of the board coming up sometime. It worked earlier, but it's not working now. Sorry. I should have tried it from here. There you go. The angelic crew of the board. So we've been the board for about a year now, so we thought it would be a good time to let you know, whoops, going too far now. There we are. To let you know what we've been up to. One of our biggest preoccupations has been to create a strategic plan, and though we have not filled in all the details, we'd like to share the broad strokes, and Reverend McKinnon has kindly allowed us to preempt her message this morning. But just so you don't miss out on any biblical message, I'd like to tell you how I believe the scriptures, this morning's scriptures, relate to our good news. Now, the angel Gabriel came to Zechariah and Elizabeth and told them they were going to have a new baby. Instead of being excited by this news, Zechariah's response was, "But that's impossible. I'm an old man, and my wife is well along in years." Well, we look around the church this morning and we see that we too are getting well along in years. But when the board presents our new baby, the strategic plan, you may find it a challenge. And we hope your response won't be like Zechariah's. That's impossible. We're too old for that. But rather, that's exciting. I want to adopt that baby. End of sermon. So back to the strategic plan. This year we hired a consultant, Nicola Manning, to help us get started and to lead us in a one-day workshop that we held last June with team leaders and other interested volunteers. We are almost finished the first draft of our plan, and we expect to be able to share it with you early in the new year. It's something we see as dynamic rather than static. And even as we are writing the plan, we are actively working towards its goals. Let me tell you a little bit about the plan. There are 3 goals, and the first one is up here. One of the most important is the redevelopment of the building, and Ross Brecken is going to tell you about that later after me. But I'm going to tell you about the other 2 goals. The first one The first one I'm going to call Weird Church, as a sort of shorthand. Now, some of you may have heard this expression before and wondered what we were talking about. Others of you who are part of Emily MacDonald's study group will have a better idea. The concept of Weird Church is based on a book by Beth Ann Estock and Paul Nixon. This book explains why we need to do church differently in the 21st century and explores some ideas of how to do church differently and invites us to find our own ways. We want to be innovative and creative in our ways of being church and of connecting with people outside our walls, especially with our neighbors in the North Park and the downtown core. I want to recognize the work of our minister, Sheila McKinnon, in this regard. Ever since she's arrived, she's been building bridges with our neighbors. The more visible aspects of that were our barbecues last summer and an upcoming pasta dinner that Emily told you about this month. And I also want to recognize Emily MacDonald, who led a study group on the Weird Church group and brought together the new Weird Church team. This brings me to the second goal of our strategic plan, which deals with our staff and volunteers. We have terrific staff members here at First Met, but our past experience has taught us that we need to have a succession plan in place to be prepared when members of our staff retire. Now, one of our greatest achievements this year has been finding congregation members to lead and revitalize our Sunday school. Haley Henderson, who you see here, and Misha Kanstra. It's an example of how we have the resources within ourselves to do marvelous things. Which brings me to you, our volunteers. You have only to look through the bulletin every Sunday to see how much we do as a church, and everything we do depends on volunteers. And with fewer and ever-aging volunteers, we need to continually reevaluate our programs. We can't just do things because we've always done them. As we find new ways of doing things, of doing church, we have to let go of some of the old ways. Because we value our volunteers, we don't want to demand so much of them that they burn out. And we want to develop a succession plan for them as well. And we don't want to ask them to do what they don't want to do. There is a job here for each and every one of you. We just need to match you with your passion or with that one little task that you could do to serve the church. We don't want to burden our volunteers with long, boring meetings either, unless that really is your passion. And if that's the case, please come and see me after this service. I'd like to invite you to join the board. Just kidding. So the third goal of our strategic plan is the redevelopment of our First Met building. And I'm going to leave that to Ross Brecken, who's the chair of the redevelopment task group, to fill you in on the latest news on that front. Ross.
Thank you, Adina. Good morning, everyone. Goal number 3 has to do with more than the redevelopment project. It has to do with the financial revitalization of First Met. But that's a big, 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 big topic, and I'm not going to spend any time on that today. That's for a future update from the board. What I wanted to do today was to give you a progress report on the redevelopment project. That's the First Met redevelopment project. Now, we had a practice session this morning. Well, it was a 9 a.m. service, but it was our first dress rehearsal of this. And Sheila did a much better job of setting me up. She made reference to Matthew and the book of Matthew and the many, many references to hell in that book. I don't understand the theological significance of it, except I thought she was trying to forewarn you about the presentation on redevelopment. And I wanted to tell you, this is not about hell. This is a good news story, the redevelopment project update. So I'm going to start by reminding everybody here today what the First Met redevelopment project is all about. It's a project to rehabilitate our church's property assets, essentially our buildings. And it's the purpose of revitalizing them is to meet the changing challenges that are facing the church and to provide a practical benefit to the wider community. And you're going to say, well, what's different about that? We've been doing that here as a congregation for over a century. We built a church to meet the needs of a congregation. We built the additional buildings to meet the changing needs of the congregation at the time. That was in the 60s. We have been outreaching to our community for years. But the real story here is that needs change over time. And buildings deteriorate over time. And that puts a huge strain on the finances of the church. And so our project, redevelopment project, is all about realigning our physical resources to the needs of the congregation and the needs of the community, which have changed over time. So in May of 2018, you will recall if you were here, the congregation and the First Met trustees agreed to a redevelopment project working with the Pacific Mountain region. And in May, we signed that agreement and began work. Well, when we signed that agreement, it made us a part of the Pacific Mountain region's three-point redevelopment portfolio. So what's a three-point redevelopment portfolio anyway? It's not a common term. But it's the name of a partnership between First Met and BC Housing Corporation, underwritten by our provincial government, the BC government. And the features of this program with BC Housing is to develop affordable housing and, for the benefit of the sponsoring congregations, to provide new or improved church space. And the other key feature of the program is that it's financed by BC Housing. This is very important in the space of redevelopment because redevelopment projects are very expensive, and financing, the cost of financing, is usually a significant portion of the cost of the redevelopment. By working with BC Housing, we are getting money we'll be getting money at better rates and better terms, which makes the overall project affordable to do. Now, we are not the only church in this portfolio. Currently, there are 5 United churches in British Columbia that are part of this portfolio. And the list is there. It's Como Lake United, Brecon United, Brighouse United Church, First Met, of course, and Lakeview United Church in Vancouver. The 4 other projects in that portfolio started before we did, and therefore are further ahead. And I know you can't see the pictures very well that are included on this particular slide, but the top picture is Brecon United as it was a year ago. And the picture at the bottom is an architect's rendering of what it's going to look like at the end of the summer of 2020. Right now, it's a big hole in the ground with a foundation and walls starting to go up. So it's under construction. And each of those other churches are at various stages of development, and Como Lake is also in a construction phase. And we will be there soon enough. Before I spend any more time giving you an update on where we are today, I just want to acknowledge the large team of resources that are working on our behalf, the behalf of First Metropolitan, to make this building transformation a reality. The Pacific Mountain region has a property resource team that is headed by Terry Harrison, and you've seen Terry Harrison here on the pulpit before. Colliers International is a property development firm that the Pacific Mountain region is hired to work with Terry and manage these projects. And Shape Architecture is a new architecture firm that has been brought on by the Pacific Mountain region to do the architectural work on our project with First Met. And there are many other specialized technical consultants that the PRT will be hiring as we move forward with this project. Then in the middle, we have the First Met Redevelopment Task Group. And I just want to acknowledge that these guys have been doing a wonderful job in liaising with the Pacific Mountain region on our needs. It's David Bray, Steve Gray, myself, Lyndon Holman, Kathy Cook, Peter Clugston, and Sheila McKinnon and Bruce Davies have been working with the RTG as we move forward together. And I do have to say, although they're last on the list or bottom on the list, they are of paramount importance to the team, and that's BC Housing Corporation, because we could not do this without their involvement. Now you may ask, you signed the agreement with the Pacific Mountain region in May of 2018. What the heck have you guys been doing? Here we are, November 2019. That's more than a year later, a year and a half. Well, since May and through May through January, we have done the following things. BC Housing reviewed the proposal that the property resource team gave them in June of 2018, and they spent 6 months looking at that proposal. It was a proposal to get funding to do the pre-development stage of the project, which is planning, figuring out exactly what it is what we want to do and exactly how much it's going to cost and exactly how it's going to be paid for. But the good news is, in January of 2019, they decided that they would give us the funding in blocks. The redevelopment task group last November, actually it's almost exactly a year ago, we began engaging with First Met staff and volunteers and the congregation in discussions about how we're using the space today and how we envisage using the space in the future. And we documented all of that information, packaged it up, and on the first day of winter, we sent it off to the architects in Vancouver, working out with the property resource team to take a look at. This was input for them and their analysis of our space needs. While this was going on, also the property resource team was hunting around the community for technical resources that would be able to help us through the pre-development phase. That's no small task. And then in February, between February and September, we've been doing some other things as well. The property resource team hired some consultants, a number of consultants, and they conducted a building condition assessment of the heritage building, and that's this building with the sanctuary and the annex attached to it, and the Christian education wing, to confirm the restoration estimates that were done in our initial proposal to BC Housing. These were estimates with assumptions. They needed to be confirmed. And these consultants were hired to help confirm those estimates. One of the things, the primary reasons for them to do that was to determine whether or not we could make this project work the way we thought it would work. And BC Housing wanted to see an independent review of those estimates to give them the confidence to go ahead with us. And in that same period, Shape Architecture began its work on looking at the input that we had given them the previous December on our space needs. And they had, their challenge was to figure out how to do all the things we want to do in the space that would be left after the apartment housing complex was built. Because that's what our project envisages. It envisages an affordable housing apartment block in the space where the fellowship hall currently is, and a restored or renovated heritage building and Christian education wing for us to carry on our activities. And they completed their analysis in September, and we had a meeting with them on September the 10th, which I want to tell you about because it's some pretty interesting things came out of that analysis that they did. One of this analysis, one of the primary purposes of this analysis for the architects was to determine whether or not we needed the space in the Heritage Building as well as the space in the Christian Education Wing. And so they answered that question with their findings that they shared with us on September 10th. And their findings were that, as we suspected, or we on the RTG suspected, the space that we have in the Heritage Building and Annex is more than sufficient to satisfy our needs today and the foreseeable future. They recommended then that we not restore the Christian Education Wing, which is a very expensive proposition for a building that was put up in the 60s, but rather that we use it as part of its footprint as part of the housing complex. In other words, make the housing complex a little bit bigger than we had originally planned. Now, they haven't figured out exactly how to do that yet, but that was their recommendation to us. The other issue that they addressed in this high-level analysis of our space requirements was an idea that we presented as part of our input to them. And that idea was we could put a mezzanine level in the sanctuary, create another floor up higher, put our sanctuary up top, and have a gathering space down below. This idea was not initiated by the RTG. It came up in 2011 when we had an architecture doing some imagination sessions with the congregation, and it sort of carried forward over the years. And so there was quite a number of references by various people in the input that we gave the architects. And so they looked at that and they said, there's not a really good architectural or engineering reason to do that. Some real big problems with it, all of which could be dealt with money, but that was the big problem. Is there enough money available? For example, the air handling and heating of this space would have to be changed dramatically to accommodate a new floor. The acoustics of the space, even if you put the sanctuary portion on the upper level, there'd still be some issues, potential issues with the acoustic issues. The capacity of this gathering space here with the galleries up above would be reduced because you wouldn't have the galleries up above, which, by the way, believe it or not, accommodate more people than the main level do. So there's a hard reality. So it's, from their point of view, it's a no-go for this project, that idea. And that's good. We found that out before we started it. The other thing that they commented on from the input that they got from the congregation was the strong message that we need a new kitchen if we lose the fellowship hall. And I think everyone in this congregation agrees with that idea. And they said there's a way to do it in the Heritage Building as part of the redevelopment project. And that is to take the exterior wall of the DMR and move it out to give you enough space on the side of the DMR to create a multi-use kitchen. So details to come, but they said it could be done, and it could be done within the project budget. So that's good news for everybody who raised that concern. The architects also made, again, some very high-level, not detailed stuff yet, but high-level recommendations of how we would, where we would put different things in the Heritage Building. The details still have to be worked out. But it was, I guess they gave us this information to give us comfort that it could be done. They said that we would should take the offices that are now in the Christian Education Wing and move them down to a part of the lower level, which you know today is occupied by ICA, But ICA is not staying beyond our redevelopment project. They have plans to move on because their needs are growing faster than our needs or capacity to support them. So that would be one part of the downstairs area, which is already decked out with offices and meeting rooms and classrooms and daycares. And then they thought for the other part, we would create space for the children and youth ministries, music rehearsal, a green room for performances that are taking place in the sanctuary upstairs where artists and so on can prepare for their events, and a large multi-use meeting space on that level. On the main level, they recommended that we consider removing the remaining pews in the main level of the sanctuary to give us a bigger space for gatherings, as we will want to use this available space more often than we are today. And this would be for church events, for public events, for the community as well. They suggested, they brought back an idea which we have had ourselves before about combining the DMR room and the chapel into a larger room that's dividable, configurable, so we can carry on having a chapel there when we want, but we can open it up for bigger events when we need to. And of course, with the addition of a kitchen adjacent to this space would make a fantastic replacement for what we have in the fellowship hall, although not quite as big. On the upper level, they said we should carry on with the Healing Pathways room. I think it's room 225 on the second level. This room is getting lots of use today, and will continue as those programs continue to grow. We'll probably get more use in the future. They thought we should maybe think about taking classroom room 217 and fixing it up so that it's suitable for various church exercise programs. We're doing lots of exercise programs, yoga, tai chi, and those kinds of things, and they thought room 217 might be a good place to put that. One of the challenges we have even today is storage for all of our stuff, and they thought we should convert room 223 into a multi-purpose storage room, well organized, and easily accessible, and so on. They also said that we might, down the road, as our need for open spaces grew, we might want to consider removing some of the pews in the upper galleries to create open spaces, and that might be for meetings, quiet meetings, for lounge kind of arrangement, quiet spaces, or display areas for various things that we want to once in a while display. But that's kind of still up in the air, and it's going to be sorted out in detail. One of the key design objectives that they stressed in all of these recommendations is that where possible, they're going to look at creating flexible multi-use spaces that are suitable for both church use and letting. So that's kind of where we are today in terms of what we've seen from the architects, but there are some next steps, very important next steps that are taking place in the remainder of this year and going into next year. First of all, we have to secure additional pre-development monies from BC Housing. The pre-development money was agreed to, but the terms were we'll get it in lumps as we complete each stage. And at the same time as we're securing that additional funding, we're going to be examining some different design options or design scenarios for incorporating the footprint of the Christian education wing into the new apartment housing. What's that going to look like? What's it going to cost? And to figure out what it's going to cost, the property resource team is now looking for a quantity surveyor to come in and do those cost estimates. And we're also in that time frame going to refine the space design and the estimate costs for the renovations to the heritage building. So this is the process where we'll get into a bit more detail in terms of exactly what we're going to do, figure out what it's going to cost. And then, of course, sort of the next step would be to obtain BC Housing approval to proceed to municipal approval and rezoning if it's required. What are the estimated timelines? I'm sure you're all interested in that. Will you be around when this actually happens? I wonder some days. However, while it's a slow process, it's a sure process, and it's worked with other congregations, and I'm sure it will work with us. Pre-development planning completed by the end of 2020, but that's subject to, of course, what the City of Victoria decides to do with our permissions, and that could be delayed by that. Phase 1, which would be the construction of the apartment housing and major renovations to the Heritage Building, would take place between 2021 and 2022. And the Phase 2 of our restoration of the Heritage Building would take place over the next 10 to 15 years. We don't know exactly what would fit into those 10 or 15 years, but we will before we start, and we'll have more updates on that, so thank you. Oh, by the way, I just want to say, there's a handout with the details of what I just gave you on the architect's recommendations, so you're welcome to grab one on your way out. Thank you.
Church. We visited their pit that their building was once on top of, and we said to them, what is your number one most important piece of advice? And they said, take the time to communicate. You cannot fail with detail. And so I really thank Ross for going through this and piece by piece, so that if you have any questions, please get in touch with Ross or any of the people named on that RTG group, because our communication with each other about this is just so important. But I do know we're all anticipating birthday cake, and so I'm going to suggest we swap out the last hymn and put number 1 at the end. So we'll just drop one hymn and get to that birthday cake just that little bit quicker. Would you join me, please, in the prayer for dedication? It's in your bulletin. Inspire us, O God, to bring the very best of who you created us to be. Equip us to serve your will as we fulfill our calling and mission as the church. Wherever possible, to offer hope. Wherever authentic, to offer joy. And at all times to strive to offer reconciliation to a world so very much in need. Would you continue with the prayers of the people? O God, whom no image can encompass, no definition encircle, and yet who meets us in the gentle touch of love, the beauty of a butterfly's wing, and the laughter of children. Help us to move beyond our attempts to limit you, intellectualize you, or eliminate you from all that is earthy, sensuous, or vibrant, so that we may greet you in every particle of this spectacular universe you are creating. We remember Joyce Thompson in hospital and Gloria in her celebration. Amen. Thanks. Let us build a house where God can dwell. As we go from this place, you know that you are welcome here. We pray that we might all work to that day where more and more people feel welcome here. Together we build that house of welcome, that house of reconciliation, that house of the way of the one we follow. May this be a week where we feel the welcome of the sacred Spirit in the song of the bird, the bloom of the last few roses left in our gardens, and the indwelling love of the God who made us. Amen.